not a Tory, I'm not New Labour. There's no preconceived notion of what I'm going to say or think. However, his return to Scotland, the Scottish Government, the BBC, has been a very high-profile position. In addition to his BBC role, he's chairman of the Board of Trustees of the National Museum of Scotland, has been variously connected with the Scottish Opera and the Scottish Ballet. Smith has been described as a warm, witty man who could hold his own in a Glasgow pub. But how many men in Glasgow pubs can claim to have bought an island? Robert Smith recently bought the uninhabited west coast island of Inchmarnock off Bute and is currently researching its history. When asked why, he explained, "I just always wanted an island. You can put it down to the male menopause if you like." Mr. Chancellor, John Young is a NASA astronaut. What more is there that I can possibly say? Everything else would seem to be utterly superfluous. Most of us have only seen the launch of a space shuttle or its predecessors on television. Television does not do justice to the power and sheer size of the launch systems involved, let alone the complexity of the engineering. No one can doubt the bravery and courage of such a man that would put their lives to such a complicated and untried engineering system. In July 1963, MacDonald presented NASA with a plan for converting the Gemini contract from a fixed fee to an incentive fee. The idea was to give the company a chance to earn greater profits by cutting costs. My idea of bravery is to sit in a capsule on the top of a launch vehicle built by a company who have been given the chance to earn greater profits by cutting costs. John Young has been NASA's conscience as well as its role model, and his memos have been famously blistering. His loyalty and commitment to NASA remain unchallenged, but he had the bravery to speak out after the 1986 Challenger disaster. John Young is the first person to fly in space 6 times from Earth, 7 times including a lunar liftoff. Young's 6th flight was as a spacecraft commander of the first Space Lab mission in 1983. He was also on 5 backup spaceflight crews and has put in more than 15,000 hours into training, mostly in simulators and simulations. He has given lectures in Edinburgh, Glasgow, and Aberdeen as part of the Millennium Festival flight program, and his many visits to Scotland have inspired people that he has met with his enthusiasm for aerospace. Gene Cernan, who circled the moon with Young on Apollo 10, famously commented about John Young's persistence and dedication. In about 100 years' time, they'll dig up this Johnson Space Center, and there will be John Young sitting on a simulator training for the next flight. Mr. Chancellor, it gives me with great pleasure that I now invite you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Engineering on Terence Heng.
Cé scientiae machinalis doctorum trium.
And on Robert Murray McKinley.
Cé scientiae machinalis doctorum trium.
Congratulations. And on John Young.
Cé scientiae machinalis doctorum trium.
And the honorary degree of Doctor of the University on Sir Robert Haldane Smith.
Te Universitatis Doctorum trium.
And on Charles Murray Stewart.
Te Universitatis Doctorum trium.
Mr. Chancellor, by authority of the Senate, I present to you these persons on whom the Senate desires you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Letters: Cyril Gerber, Brian John McMaster, James Downey Robertson, Kirstine Ann Wark. Ian Hamilton Finlay, sir, on whom the Senate also desires you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Letters, is unable to attend today's ceremony due to ill health, but it is our intention later in the year to confer the degree at his home in Little Sparta in South Lanarkshire. Mr. Chancellor, embossed in gold lettering on the hardcover of Alistair Gray's collection of short stories, Unlikely Stories Mostly, cunningly concealed behind the dust jacket, lies the motto, "Work as if you live in the early days of a better nation." What for many of us in Scotland in the past few years has been stimulating is not the sense of a nation already achieved and to be celebrated, the great we nation which in our more sentimental or enhanced moments we have always imagined ourselves to be, but the sense of a new kind of national entity in the process of becoming. Beneath all the stumblings, the mistakes, the embarrassments, there has been the sense of the local, the immediate, and the experimental. The people through in Edinburgh may sometimes seem to be headbangers, but they're our headbangers, and they're banging their heads in new and interesting ways. If, as Mao Zedong tells us, it is too early to say whether or not the French Revolution has been a success, it is certainly too early to pronounce on Scottish devolution. But that sense of being in the early days of something, whatever it is, brings a kind of excitement and a kind of hope with it. The arts and culture are central to this process of becoming, and it is appropriate that the university should honour them in its 550th Jubilee year. In an influential book, Benedict Anderson talks of the nation as an imagined community. Imagined because the members of the community have never met and do not know each other. One of the most significant ways in which they are able to imagine that they know each other and share a sense of community is not through the constantly changing edicts of government or the fluctuations of the market, but through the shared experiences, the continuities and discontinuities of art, ideas, and imagination, culture in its broadest sense. The process did not simply begin in 1998. The people before you today, sir, have worked in different spheres of art, culture, and media over a number of years, as if they were indeed working in the early days of a better nation, some more early than others. And they have given us the images, words, artifacts, experiences, ideas, and meanings which have allowed us to imagine ourselves as a community in the process of becoming. Not the nation which was imagined by the heroic mythologies of the past, but a nation which is imagined as diverse, eccentric in the best sense of the word, experimental and international. To adopt the slogan, they have thought globally and acted locally. You will recall, Chancellor, from your own undergraduate days that art and culture were not always the first words which sprang to mind at the mention of Glasgow. It is conventional to date the transformation from 1990 and the City of Culture, or perhaps from a few years earlier and the Garden Festival. But with hindsight, some of the most significant blossoms were already in the garden by then. The opening of the Borough, the renovation of the Theatre Royal as the home of Scottish Opera and Scottish Ballet, Giles Habergal at the Citizens. Among the earliest blossoms should also be numbered the ubiquitous Chip and the Compass Gallery. If Ronnie Clydesdale at the Chip taught Glasgow how to eat, Cyril Gerber, before us today, taught us at the Compass how to look at contemporary art which did not yet have the seal of approval on it, and for the lucky ones, he taught them how to buy paintings, often by selling them on tick. In 1969, when the Compass Gallery opened, Glasgow did not have a single gallery exhibiting and selling contemporary art. Cyril scoured the art schools for the new talent at the point of its emergence and gave many young artists their first exhibition. Many of them, Adrian Wisniewski springs to mind, went on to become established international painters. He introduced the New Generation show for artists in their first year out of art school. He introduced the Christmas show, first and often last stop on the Christmas shopping trek. The most recent one opened last Friday. And he did indeed introduce payment by installment. All of these have become standard practice in galleries around the country, but the Compass did them first. Cyril began his career some years ago now in the family carpet business, but his passion was always art and art collecting. In 1963, with a group of local artists, which included Bet Lowe, Tom MacDonald, and Philip Reeves, he established the new Charing Cross Gallery. When Charing Cross was vandalized by the city planners in the late 60s, he opened the Compass Gallery on West Regent Street, and more recently, further along West Regent Street, he added the Cyril Gerber Fine Art Gallery. The significance of the Compass Gallery for the cultural life of Glasgow was recognised in 1990 with an exhibition in the tramway devoted to the painters Cyril had fostered. In the catalogue, the critic and playwright W. Gordon Smith refers to the gallery with affection. Gloriously hand-knitted, he says. Friendly, informal, trusting, cheerfully disorganized, hysteria, only one drastic phone call away. And the former keeper of the Scottish National Gallery of Modern Art, Douglas Hall, captures the way in which the gallery reflects the personality of its owner. Cyril has never set himself up in opposition to anything except fashionable nihilism. He has not set himself up to promote anything except talent. His judgment is equaled only by his generosity and modesty. In our Jubilee year, sir, we can afford to be generous to our sister city with its younger university, and we can acknowledge that Edinburgh too is a city of culture for at least 4 weeks every year. As director of the Edinburgh International Festival, one would expect Brian McMaster to think globally and act locally. What has distinguished him from all recent directors is that he has thought and travelled globally, but actually lived locally. He is the first director within memory to have his home in Edinburgh, and from the perspective of Glasgow, living in Edinburgh is a sign of real commitment. He has also stayed the course. This is his 10th year as director of a festival which is loved and respected internationally for everything except the level of its funding. He has, of course, been well trained in the white-hot crucible of opera management, a qualified solicitor after working in the record industry with EMI International Classics. He worked first with the English National Opera, then with the Welsh National Opera in its heyday, then as artistic director of the Vancouver Opera. In his spare time, he is chair of the National Opera School, he is a member of the Arts Council of England, and he has been a judge of the Cardiff Singer of the World competition since its inception. He was awarded a CBE in 1989. As director of one of the premier artistic festivals in the world, he would be doing something very wrong indeed, or very conservative, if every critic were satisfied with every decision he made, or if every company or every event he brought to Edinburgh were met with universal acclamation. Only yesterday, I heard of an eminent figure on the art scene who met Brian at an airport. "Where are you off to?" she asked. "I'm off to see a 5-hour performance of a Greek tragedy in Russian," he replied. "Well," she said, "I hope you don't enjoy yourself. Otherwise, the rest of us will have to see it too." Unlike many other cultural institutions, the Edinburgh Festival under Brian McMaster's direction has not always made art easy, and he has asked his audiences to work for their pleasures. But he has more than fulfilled his remit. He has been adventurous and truly international in his choices. He has kept a 50-year-old festival youthful and experimental, and he has brought to it work which the public did not yet know that it wanted. Mr. Chancellor, I must confess to a problem which I have experienced in the formality of our proceedings. Not moving in these circles myself, I set out to discover what I could about James Downey Robertson, the name on the list I was given. Having exhausted Who's Who, a characteristically modest entry, I began to ask Glasgow artists what they could tell me about James Downey Robertson, only to be met by blank stares. I was beginning to wonder why we were giving an honorary degree to a Glasgow artist who was unknown to other Glasgow artists, until at a gathering in the Art Club in Bath Street a few weeks ago, one of them finally twigged how ignorant I was and said, "Oh, you mean Jimmy Robertson," and pointed to the canvas under which we were standing, which was indeed a Robertson, and a very fine one, and everyone knew Jimmy Robertson as a major Scottish artist and teacher, despite their apparent ignorance of James Downey Robertson. Jimmy Robertson then was born in 1931 and educated at Hillhead School and the Glasgow School of Art. He taught briefly at Keith Grammar School before joining the Glasgow School of Art, first as a part-time lecturer in 1959, then as a full-time lecturer in 1967, before becoming a senior lecturer in drawing and painting in 1975. I asked one of his former students, now a well-known painter in his own right, what kind of teacher Jimmy was. He taught by example, he said, rather than by the book. The example seems to have worked, because as soon as they realized it was Jimmy Robertson I was talking about, most of the successful artists in Glasgow seemed to have been taught by him or to have taught with him. As a painter by reputation, he is his own man, an individual artist rather than a member of a group or a follower of fashion. His work is abstract but rooted in landscape, colour and light. In a catalogue for an exhibition of his work at the Glasgow School of Art in 2000, Sandy Muffet says, "In common with many of the best Scottish painters, both past and present, Robertson has responded to the Scottish landscape by creating a body of work which is in essence deeply romantic and truly expressive." Or to quote Jimmy Robertson himself, "My paintings are a bit like what my old maths teacher told me, show the working." And a lot of artists think they're painting, but they're not. What they're doing is filling in. Jimmy Robertson is a painter and not a filler-in. He has won numerous awards and was made a Royal Scottish Academician in 1989. He is president of the Art Club and a genial host. His paintings are owned by individuals, corporations and galleries, including our own Hunterian Gallery, and among many others by the Scottish Arts Council, the Royal Glasgow Institute, the Royal Scottish Academy, and most royal of all, the Queen Mother. Kirsty Walkser thinks globally and shuttles locally. For someone so much in the public eye, it is remarkably difficult to find anyone with anything bad to say about Kirsty. However, Mr. Chancellor, in an era when confession is deemed to be good not only for the soul but for the career, I feel bound to mention a youthful indiscretion committed at an age when perhaps she couldn't be expected to know any better. Though growing up in Kilmarnock and being educated at a perfectly good school in the west of Scotland, Kirsty Walk chose to go to Edinburgh University. It doesn't seem to have done her too much harm, though perhaps, like the French Revolution, it is too early to tell. And in any case, though she missed the direct benefits herself, she is well connected to Glasgow University and must surely have experienced indirect benefits. Both her parents are graduates of the university, and they were married in the university chapel in 1953. Kirsty joined the BBC as a radio researcher in 1976. She went on to produce Good Morning Scotland and worked for a spell on The World at One. She moved to television in 1983, first as a producer and then in the role in which she is best known, as a presenter. 7 Days, Reporting Scotland, Left, Right and Centre, The Late Show, One Foot in the Past, Wordsworth Walk, The Kirsty Walk Show, and probably most famously Newsnight, where she has been part of the team since 1993. It is only when you string the titles together that you realize how much a part of the national fabric she has been for the last 10 years, interrogating with a sometimes ferocious intelligence and an awe-inspiring grasp of the issues, and managing to give the sense, more than any other interviewer I can think of, that this is not simply a gladiatorial display, a boys' game, but that there is an ethical core to the questions she is asking. In 1991, with her husband Alan Clements, Kirsty formed Walk Clements, which is now the largest independent production company in Scotland. The company is a major employer of bright young graduates, many from my own department of Theatre, Film and Television Studies, who have ideas and initiative, precisely the kind of graduate who 10 years ago would have had to take the high road south. To use the language of enterprise, Mr. Chancellor, Kirsty Walk is both a cultural and an economic asset in these early days of what may yet become a better nation. Mr. Chancellor, it is with great pleasure that I now invite you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Letters on Cyril Gerber.
Te literarum doctorum creamus.
And on Brian McMaster.
Te literarum doctorum creamus. That's very good. And congratulations.
And on James Robertson.
Te literarum doctorum creamus.
And on Kirsty Walk.
Te literarum doctorum creamus.
Chancellor, by authority of the Senate, I present to you these persons on whom the Senate wishes you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Divinity, the Right Reverend Richard Frederick Holloway and Chief Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Henry Sachs, and this person on whom the Senate wishes you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of the University, Dr. Bashir Ahmed Maan. Mr. Chancellor, for 550 years, the University of Glasgow has been intimately connected with the study and practice of religion. We have already recognized this year some of our long religious connections, and today we celebrate our connections with further rich and venerable traditions. And please may I slow down a bit now, sir. Via Veritas Vita, this university is committed to a search, a pilgrimage, a way. It is committed to truth. It is committed to the enhancement of human life, dignity, rights. It has never been afraid to raise ultimate questions. What of God in fashion and out of fashion? How do we become more humane in our society? How do we achieve a discernment between religion that is good for us and religion that is bad for us? The shape of the mystery changes with our constructs, and the underlying issues remain. All three of these graduands have contributed to the illumination of some of these puzzles. They would not perhaps always agree with one another about the perspectives which faith might recommend, but this independence is their strength. I begin, Mr. Chancellor, with Dr. Holloway, lately Primus of the Scottish Episcopal Church. Dr. Holloway, Saint Richard, Bishop and Martyr. I shall speak freely, Mr. Chancellor. Since it's Wednesday, I'm a Presbyterian. Richard Frederick Holloway was born in Fife in 1933. He studied theology at Kelham Theological College in Edinburgh and in Union Theological Seminary, New York. He worked as a priest in Glasgow from 1963, when he and Jean lived in a flat in a close in the Gorbals. He then moved in directions which some might regard as rather down market, to Edinburgh, to Boston, and to Oxford. From 1986, he was Bishop of Edinburgh, and from 1992 to 2000, the Primus. He writes books. He has a nationwide healing ministry and therapeutic function as the clergyman the tabloids most love to hate. He has contributed to public policy as a member of the Warnock Commission on Human Fertilization and Embryology and to many other public issues. He has been a theologian, an immensely well-read theologian. He has also been a conspicuously courageous Scottish churchman. Along with perhaps only Desmond Tutu among world Christian leaders, Bishop Richard has spoken up consistently for gay people. He has been a Daniel trapped in the lion's den, surrounded by a horde, a pride of lions, perhaps mercifully not a gay pride. Not all may commend his wisdom in this, but all can appreciate his courage. In Glasgow, too, we are particularly grateful for his pioneering work in the Gorbals group, among another group of the most underprivileged in our society. Dr. Jonathan Sachs is Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregations of the British Commonwealth of Nations since 1991. Born in London in 1948, a Cambridge graduate, actually Keyes College, but I promised to be charitable this morning, and a London PhD. Dr. Sachs was lecturer and then principal of Jews College in London and has received many honors around the world. He was a brilliant Reith lecturer. He is a profound scholar and writer and lots of other things besides. Jewish people have contributed hugely to the development of our society for a very long time. In Scottish history, the majority response to the presence of Jews has been somewhat mixed. In the church, we have alternated at critical moments between wholehearted affirmation and deafening silence. Outside Scotland, British Jews have had a profound and redemptive influence on events both inside and outside these islands. Dr. Sachs has himself argued eloquently for a humane understanding of religion which always seeks to build bridges between communities. As he said in his Reith lectures, I believe that religions do not need to be authoritarian to possess authority, nor need they be exclusive to be authentic. The building of bridges between religious communities has never been a more urgent task, and we are grateful to Dr. Jonathan Henry Sachs for his imaginative and effective ministry of reconciliation and dialogue in the public life of this country over many years. I come now, Mr. Chancellor, to Dr. Mann. The emergence of non-Western religions in the Glasgow area, by which I don't mean just Edinburgh people, is a phenomenon principally of the last decades. The Asian community is an ever-increasing source of great enrichment to our Scottish culture. It brings diversity to our monolithic perspectives, a blessed otherness, an identity in difference, a reminder that we're all human beings whom God loves and values equally. Dr. Mann is a much-respected leader in this community, not least through that necessary political engagement, without which culture may simply be a distraction from real people's actual lives. Bashir Mann was born in what is today Pakistan and came to Glasgow in 1953, a Glasgow magistrate since 1968, the first Asian magistrate in Glasgow, a councillor since 1970. He is currently convener of Strathclyde Joint Police Board. And to be entirely honest, Dr. Mann, it was my wife who was driving at the time. Cooperation between community and police has never been more important. We remember Kirsat Dag, asylum seeker, not the first to be persecuted here, and sadly perhaps not the last. Never an isolationist, Bashir Mann has not hesitated to make common cause with other political and religious leaders in the west of Scotland. A former honorary research fellow in this university, Dr. Mann's monograph, The New Scots, The Story of Asians in Scotland, remains a must-read, not least for its coverage of the history of Jewish, Irish, and other immigrants, as well as Asians. As he says in conclusion, to get rid of racism, and its ramifications altogether is a Herculean task. It requires a change of heart and attitudes, something which it could take a generation of dedicated policymakers to achieve. But a start has to be made, and there is no time like the present to do that. There is no time like the present either to honor the huge debt which civilization owes to Islam. Mr. Chancellor, it is with the greatest pleasure that I invite you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Divinity on Dr. Richard Holloway.
Te divinitatis doctorum creamus.
And on Dr. Jonathan Sachs.
Te divinitatis doctorum creamus.
And to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of the University on Dr. Bashir Maan.
Te universitatis doctorum creamus.
Mr. Chancellor, by authority of Senate, I present to you this person on whom the Senate desires you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Engineering, Sir John Young Stewart. And this person on whom the Senate desires you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of the University, Craig Collins Reedy. Mr. Chancellor, commensurate with the university's tradition of excellence, not only in academic performance, but also in the sports arena, we have the privilege to honour two natives of the west of Scotland, who, through their undiminished passion for sport, have substantially influenced and enhanced attitudes towards sport, not only in Scotland, but also worldwide. Sir John Young Stewart, Jackie to the world, first entered the public awareness as a Formula 3 motor racing driver in 1963 with Ken Tyrrell. He had his first Formula 1 success at Monza in 1965 as a BRM driver with Colin Chapman, but then returning subsequently to the Tyrrell stable. Indeed, the Stewart-Tyrrell partnership is still recognized as one of the greatest in the sport. All told, Jackie Stewart won 3 World Championships, amassing a then record 27 Grand Prix wins. This record overtook by 2 that of another Scot, Jim Clark, and remarkably it stood for 14 years. Motor racing was not Jackie Stewart's first foray into the international sporting arena, however. He gained international honours as a clay pigeon shooter and was reserved for the 1960 Rome Olympics. And he maintains a strong interest in shooting, both recreationally and through the Gleneagles Jackie Stewart Shooting School. What may be less evident to the man in the street, perhaps, is Jackie Stewart's pivotal role in elevating safety standards and medical facilities for motorsport. This he spearheaded in the mid-60s with Lewis Stanley at BRM, a fight to which he has remained tirelessly committed. Sterling Moss has said that Jackie Stewart is a man who drove fast enough to win at the lowest possible speed. Jackie Stewart retired from Formula 1 racing at the relatively young age of 34, converting his energies into creating a highly successful business career while remaining an eloquent and forceful spokesman for motor racing. He rapidly became the commentator of choice for the major sports networks, both in the USA and at home. With his son, Paul Stewart, he founded the Stewart Ford Racing Team in 1996, which, despite competition from the larger factory teams, posted one of the most impressive Formula One debut seasons. Jackie Stewart has received numerous accolades for his accomplishments in motor racing. An OBE in 1971, the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, and the US Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year in 1973, and induction into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame in 1990. Some argued that the conferment of his knighthood was possibly a little overdue. Mr. Chancellor, as we approach the Olympic year of 2002 and the Winter Games in Salt Lake City, it is appropriate also to address the contributions of Craig Reedy. Many will know of him as chairman of the British Olympic Association, others as a partner in one of our local firms of independent financial advisors. In 1962, Craig Reedy received the degree of Master of Arts from Glasgow University and the degree of Bachelor of Laws in 1964. The early 60s was an unusually rich period in the university's recent history. Craig Reedy, the late Donald Dewar, the late John Smith, and Ming Campbell were all fellow students. Craig Reedy's legal education at Glasgow University and his subsequent career in financial management, together with his abiding passion for badminton, provided the linchpin for what has become a distinguished tenureship at the BOA. Since 1992, he has led the BOA delegation to all Winter and Summer Games, culminating in the 2000 Sydney Games, which produced the best ever British medal tally. This is a reflection, without doubt, of Craig Reedy's commitment to the development of the specialized BOA pre-Olympic 1996 Tallahassee and 2000 Gold Coast training camps. He has been an influential member of the International Olympic Committee since 1994, serving on the Athens 2004 Coordination Commission and the Evaluation Commission for the 2008 Games. Through his membership of the board of the World Anti-Doping Agency and chairmanship of WADA's Finance and Administration Committee, Craig Reedy is also a strong voice for clean Olympic sport. It was badminton that provided the foundation for Craig Reedy's future path in sports administration. Legend has it that soon after his matriculation, he took on and soundly beat the president of the university's badminton club, soon thereafter gaining a blue, representing the Scottish universities, and going on to play at national and international levels. It wouldn't be an over-exaggeration to state that through his stellar services to the Scottish Badminton Union and the International Badminton Federation, that Craig Reedy has been pivotal in converting badminton from a church hall activity into an internationally recognized sport with full Olympic status. A plus for shuttle diplomacy. In fact, rather than a church hall, it was the conversion of a disused paint factory that in 1977 he single-handedly organized into the National Badminton Centre, which is still today the headquarters of the Scottish Badminton Union. He also provides invaluable service to the university, both as a member of the court and as chairman of the non-academic staff pension fund trustees. Craig Reedy has received many accolades and honours over his long and distinguished career. These include his induction into the International Badminton Federation Hall of Fame in 1997 and the conferment of a CBE in 1999. Mr. Chancellor, it is with great pleasure that I now invite you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Engineering on Sir Jackie Stewart.
Te scientiae machinalis doctorum creamus.
And the honorary degree of the university on Craig Collins Reedy.
Te universitatis doctorum creamus.
Chancellor, by authority of the Senate, I present to you these persons on whom the Senate desires you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Science: Helen Bamber, Rita Rossi Colwell, Kip Stephen Thorne, and this person on whom the Senate desires you to confer the honorary degree of Doctor of Veterinary Medicine and Surgery, Feseha Gabriel. Sir, science and medicine are an integral part of this university's history, and in our Jubilee year, it is fitting that we should remember the major contribution that our university has made to scientific and medical advances over many centuries. The university can trace the teaching of some subjects of science, such as astronomy, back to the founding of the university in 1451. However, it was not really until the 1700s that major advances in the science space of the university were made, when the first lectureship in chemistry was created to support the teaching of medicine. This was followed by the appointment of Joseph Black, who had been a student in Glasgow, to the chair of anatomy and botany, and he later became professor of the practice of medicine and made the first major scientific discoveries in this university on latent heat. Although the teaching of medicine in the university was authorized by the papal bull in 1451, it was not until the 18th century that our medical school really developed, essentially in 1751. Glasgow then quickly established itself as a principal centre for medical education, and our medical school remains to this day one of the largest in Europe and has an international reputation for its research. Veterinary medicine, another jewel in the crown of our university, emerged relatively recently. Although there'd been a private veterinary college in Glasgow, in fact, since 1862, it was only in 1949 that it was amalgamated with the university under the inspirational leadership of Sir William Wipers. Key features of his leadership were a commitment to research, close links between medicine and science, and the establishment of overseas links, particularly with Africa. Mr. Chancellor, these key features of Sir William's vision and our university also characterize the four persons whom it is my pleasure to present to you today. They have each made major contributions in their own fields of science and medicine, both human and veterinary. Mr. Chancellor, first I would like to turn to the world of medicine and a special aspect of medical ethics. Helen Bamber is founder and director of the Medical Foundation for the Care of Victims of Torture. Helen Bamber was 20 years old when, at the end of the Second World War, she went to Belsen concentration camp to help rehabilitate the surviving inmates. And she stayed there for more than 2 years. As anyone who has visited such a camp, even in recent times, knows, this can have a profound and lasting effect. In Helen Bamber's case, it profoundly changed her life. Returning to Britain in 1947, she was appointed to the Committee for the Care of Children from concentration camps, in which role she was responsible for the welfare of orphan children from Auschwitz. Her subsequent career in the fields of health and social work took her to a variety of hospitals and organizations, and then in 1961, she joined the newly founded Amnesty International, where she was able to broaden her campaigning on human rights issues. In 1974, she established Amnesty International's medical group. This group exposed the work of doctors who had cooperated with torture regimes and campaigned on behalf of doctors and health professionals who were victims of torture. Over the next 20 years, the work of the medical group expanded, its members, mostly doctors, going abroad to investigate allegations of torture and human rights abuses, and providing medical help for torture victims who had fled to Britain. The specialist treatment required for the physical and psychological damage inflicted on such people led to the realization that a dedicated service offering long-term care was required. To meet that need, at the end of 1985, Helen Bamber established the Medical Foundation for the Care of Victims of Torture, the only organization in Britain today dedicated solely to providing medical treatment and psychological and practical help to victims of torture and their families. Since its doors opened, the Medical Foundation has provided treatment to some 25,000 victims. In addition, it provides training in the UK and overseas for those working with survivors of torture. Mr. Chancellor, unfortunately, the number of regimes in the world who are prepared to use torture has not diminished, and their victims need more help than ever. By awarding an honorary degree today to Helen Bamber, the university wishes to recognize the outstanding contribution she has made to addressing the needs of victims of torture. My next graduate is Dr. Rita Colwell, Director of the American National Science Foundation. Dr. Colwell's first degree was in microbiology, and she followed this with a doctorate in oceanography. She has had a very distinguished career in science and remains Professor of Microbiology and Biotechnology at the University of Maryland. Some of her most distinguished research has been in polar regions, and a geological site in Antarctica, in fact, has been named after her in recognition of her research contribution. She is the author of 16 books and has 600 scientific publications. Before coming to the National Science Foundation, Dr. Colwell was president of the University of Maryland Biotechnology Institute from 91 to 98. In 98, she became the first woman to be director of the American National Science Foundation, and in this role she has given special emphasis to increasing the participation of women and minorities in science and engineering. These are major issues which are not limited to the United States, but find residence across the Western world, including Scotland. Under her leadership, the Foundation has received significant budget increases, and its funding recently reached a level of more than $4.5 billion. In addition to these principal duties, Dr. Colwell has held many advisory positions in the US government, in non-profit science policy organizations and private foundations, as well as in the international scientific research community. She has served as president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Washington Academy of Sciences, and the American Society of Microbiology. She is a member of the American National Academy of Sciences. Mr. Chancellor, Dr. Colwell is a most eminent scientist, and the award of an honorary degree to her today reflects the university's recognition of her outstanding achievements in scientific research and education. My third graduate is Professor Kip Thorne, another American and one of the world's leading astrophysicists. He is a professor in the physics department of the California Institute of Technology. Professor Thorne has made major contributions to research, to the teaching of relativity, and provided leadership and training to generations of astrophysicists. He has devoted much of his life to the study of gravitational waves, and the award of this honorary degree comes at a particularly important time, since much of his work on the theory of gravitational waves is coming to fruition with the building of 2 large gravitational wave detectors in the USA, along with one in Italy and another in Germany, in which scientists from this university are playing a leading role. Glasgow's involvement in gravitational wave research extends over many years, and Professor Thorne's early interest in setting up a group in California to develop detectors for gravitational waves can be traced back to the 1970s, when it was made possible by his recruitment of Dr. Ronald Drever from Glasgow. Professor Thorne was one of the first to recognize the importance of black holes and neutron stars, and his early work established that pulsars are rotating neutron stars. He also recognized that the increasing accuracy of experimental tests of relativity demands a new theoretical framework for their interpretation, and he developed with his former student at CM Will, the standard framework for assessing the significance of gravitational experiments throughout the world. Professor Thorne was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and the National Academy of Sciences in the 1970s, and since that time, recognition of his innovative research has led to numerous international awards. He was actively involved in the Committee on US-USSR Cooperation in Physics, and he advises the American Congress on space science policy. Although most of his work and most of his life have been devoted to the world of astrophysics and astrophysicists, he has more recently turned his attention to a wider audience with the publication of his book entitled Black Holes and Time Warps, Einstein's Outrageous Legacy. This book has stimulated a new generation of young people about to embark on a career in modern astrophysics, as well as having a more general appeal to all those with an inquiring mind. The book epitomizes Professor Thorne's lifetime commitment to the enhancement and application of fundamental ideas and the education and stimulation of young minds. Mr. Chancellor, I finally wish to present to you Professor Feseha Gabriab, founding Dean of the Ethiopian Veterinary School. Ethiopia is a land of contrast and complexity. It ranges from high mountain plateau to parched deserts below sea level. But one of the outstanding characteristics, at least from a veterinary point of view, is that although it has the largest livestock population in Africa, until relatively recently it had very few veterinarians, and it did not have a veterinary school. This changed in 1979 when Professor Feseha Gabriab had the vision and drive to create a veterinary school in Ethiopia. Prior to this time, the very small number of Ethiopians who had the